keep going quickly. After all of this information, we did an additional walkability study to further give detail for the sidewalks. So again, it's kind of looking at places where people are going to walk and kind of using that information and tying it together with these defects that we're aware of. So we looked at high pedestrian traffic areas. We connected that with safe routes to school, so kind of a buffer around the school area and seeing where those defects are, where gaps are. Because you might have a space where people are going to walk, but if there's no sidewalks or if there are a lot of defects, you're obviously not going to get pedestrians there. We also performed some traffic counts, and then we looked at the city and kind of split it up into rural and urban development zones, because the city's not going to be developed in the same way everywhere. It really depends on who's living in a location or what's being done in that part of the city. So I'll focus on the high pedestrian traffic areas. So we looked at different, we call them pedestrian attractors, so that's spaces where people are most likely to walk to. So that includes parks, retail areas, schools, and transit stops. And based off of our research, people are mostly going to walk maybe 1/8 of a mile to 1/4 mile to get to these spaces. So we used a buffer to kind of figure out where areas of high pedestrian traffic are. And then in the future, when the city is looking at areas to improve, they can use this information and say, oh, we have a lot of defects here and it's around a lot of schools and transit stops. This is a great location to maybe look for funding sources to make an improvement. So this is just extra information to help with sidewalk improvement. And then a big part is the right-of-way, because even if you want to improve a sidewalk or install a sidewalk, it really depends on the space available, whether that's public space or private space. So what we did was another GIS exercise, and we provided the city with right-of-way widths, and this is in GIS again, so it can be updated as the city improves. So anytime there's a development done, somebody can go into this data and say, oh, we've increased the right-of-way here. Or if they want to improve the sidewalk, they might say, oh, we might not have enough space here, city right-of-way, public right-of-way, we have to look at maybe other spaces that we can look at. So this is just an extra plus as part of the study to provide more information for future improvements. And so in conclusion, for this plan, we quantified 60 miles of sidewalks, 65 miles of gaps, around 4,200 defects, approximate cost of $4.5 million. We provided some sort of prioritization score as well as the walkability study to provide detail, and then everything is in GIS, so work orders can be created through CityWorks, and then city staff is able to edit in the future. Do I still have time to go through this? Couple more minutes, okay. So I know we don't have Wi-Fi, so these are just some images of all of the data that we have. So this is a map of all the gaps and sidewalks. So green would be the sidewalks and red would be the gaps. These are all of the defects, so all of the yellow points that you are kind of faded out are all of the defects that and the endpoints that we've quantified. And then this again is the heat map of the pedestrian attractors, and all of those red lines are the gaps within the city. So you can see that there are a lot of gaps within those areas where you might have a lot of people walking. And then here's a safe route to schools, so these are buffers around schools and all of the defects within those buffers as well as gaps in that space. And then this is a heat map of all of the defects. This is the right-of-way map again. And then this is the roadway classifications connected to the urban development zones. And then this is an example of all the information that is in each defect point. So that pop-up on the left, it would be the kind of Excel table that you would get in GIS that has, the defect length, what kind of defect it is, how it should be repaired, the approximate cost, and then the photo attached to it that was taken in the field survey. And I think with that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I'll check in with our city clerk to see if we have any sticker slips regarding this particular item.
We do not. John was.
we will wait for John Elwood to submit his speaker slip. So we will just wait for him to submit it. And in fact, you can fill out the speaker slip, but if you'd like to just go ahead and approach the podium and go ahead and speak, you will have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Elwood. I've reported several sidewalk faults. Nothing's ever been done on Federal and up by where Federal turns into Broadway. There's 2 water drops for the storm drain. One is down by Federal, across the street from the main entrance to Edco. There's another one up by the former Farmers Insurance, which is close to Walgreens. There's a slab of concrete that's falling down. It's got a gap like that on each end, on one end. The other one has a gap like that on the other end. Up by the curve going on to Broadway, there was a light standard knocked down years ago, and the steel from the base is still sticking out, which is a hazard. I don't know if you caught that. But then there's another one further down on the right side of the sidewalk. But you've got to remember that bicyclists and the handicapped use the sidewalks. Not only old people like me. I used to drive a car, lots of cars. I've had to go to walking because of a hip injury and a broken neck. So those have never been addressed by the city. I want to know if those are in this survey and if they're ever going to get fixed. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, and we do not have any additional speaker slips. And so I will check in with our elected officials to see if they have any questions of staff, 2 questions per person, and I'll start with Councilmember Mendoza.
I don't really have any questions. One question that I did have, but is as we move forward with this, we want to keep in mind, we want to keep those gaps in mind, and then, at a later date, we as council members are going to decide how we're going to prioritize. We need to figure out how we're going to prioritize all this information that you've given us. I do a lot of walking in Lemon Grove and bike riding on the street, not on the sidewalk. There are, a lot of, there's a lot of room for improvement. So I'm really glad to have this as a starting point for us to, otherwise we just go with, put a sidewalk in front of my house. So, anyway, thank you very much for this very comprehensive report.
Thank you, Councilmember Mendoza. So yeah, I agree. The report's going to be very helpful for staff in developing a comprehensive maintenance program. Currently, the department has a budget of around $35,000 for sidewalk maintenance, and so we wanted to get this item before the CIP, the development of the CIP, so you could consider at that time, at the budget process time, whether or not any additional funds need to be allocated for sidewalk maintenance. Pending the sidewalk master plan approval, Staff will be developing the current year sidewalk the current year sidewalk maintenance project, which it bids out every year. But the information that was developed here will help us expedite that project. We can prioritize, give me the number, tens and nines, and based off the shape files, we already have the locations. So it saves a lot of front-end time to get those projects out in the streets.
And I love that it can be updated as time goes on, that's, what do you call it, GIS? Interestingly, while, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but community members did a walk audit of Lemon Grove with, I think it was called Walk San Diego. I have the app on my phone, this is a very old phone. But we walked around, community members volunteered, we walked around and rated the streets on our phones, and then we put them all together. But it was something that you had to do over and over again all the time. So, anyway, we appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember LeBaron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for all the information. To everybody that's been working on this, it's always good to have information. Question for Izzy, I think. Maybe the most appropriate for you to answer is, sorry I didn't catch, but earlier, please provide the name of the vendor the city used to create the sidewalk master plan, and please tell how much we spent on it.
So the vendor is Chen Ryan and Associates, and they, Wood Rogers is a sub-consultant to Chen Ryan.
With who, I'm sorry?
Chen Ryan and Associates is the prime consultant on the project. Wood Rogers is a sub-consultant.
Wood Rogers?
Wood Rogers.
Wood Rogers?
Right.
Oh, okay, Wood Rogers is a sub, okay.
And I apologize, I don't know the number that was authorized by council.
It could be ballpark.
No, we had to increase it because we wanted to get more of this geographical information. It was about $75,000 in total.
Okay, so Izzy Murguia, Public Works Director, just stated that we allocate annually $35,000 towards sidewalk, the creation of sidewalks, creation or maintenance of sidewalks, and we just spent $75,000 on a sidewalk plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Next we have Councilmember Snow.
So I noticed the big price tag of $4.5 million. Does that include acquisition of, some of these are gonna be over people's private property? Does that $4.5 million include, possible purchase of those properties, or are we gonna rely on easements from folks?
Councilmember Snow, so the costs for the defects are for the city's public sidewalks. It does not include the gas per se. That's a different figure, and we have a ballpark figure, but it's difficult to determine. We don't have sidewalk widths for the gaps, but somewhere in the ballpark figure of about 40 million, or if we were to replace all the sidewalk gaps or install new sidewalks.
Councilmember Snow, that is today's dollars. So if we go 5 years ahead, property always increases, so that number can grow as we purchase property. We will, sometimes we do get lucky and property owners give us an easement in which we can then build the sidewalk like we did here on Golden. But again, we had one property owner that didn't agree to the easement and we had to design around that particular property. So sometimes it works, and most of the time it does not. People want to get paid for taking their property.
And if I can, the figure does not include acquisition costs, to answer your question. Does not include acquisition. The 4.5.
Does the $40 million one include acquisition?
No.
I would say also that number, it really depends on if the sidewalk is feasible at that location, because that's just based off of the gaps. That would be filling in every single road, because basically how we did it, if there's a sidewalk and then if there's no sidewalk, that's a gap, but whether or not somebody would use that, or if that's a feasible location for a sidewalk, that is not included, or if that is included in that 40 million, but that number is a really large estimate, because it's hard to determine the width of the sidewalk at that portion.
Thank you so very much. Next we have Councilmember, or actually we have Mayor Pro Tem Gastel.
Councilmember Woodward. Well, first of all, I want to say that I noticed 4.3 thousand defects. That is a staggering number. Well, I'm very impressed that you found that many. Because I could probably point out a dozen defects in I walk from McKnight Drive to the Massachusetts trolley station several times a week, and I could point out a dozen or so defects. So, and so I'm impressed that you found so many. And when you said, I think one of you said half an inch as a fault to be significant, I thought that's actually a pretty high standard. I mean, because half an inch is a lot, is what I'm saying. So I said you're not being too picky, is what I'm trying to say. But what I'm also really impressed that you think that they could be repaired for just a little over $1,000 per defect, if I'm doing the math right. 4.3 thousand defects and 4.5 million estimated cost. That's a little over $1,000 per defect. There's some defects, like the ice plant that's growing over some of the sidewalk where I go, that could be repaired for a lot less. But I'm sure that there are some other defects that would cost quite a lot more than $1,000. So I understand it's an average. But yeah, I think we're on the right track. I mean, I totally understand the concern that we would be spending more for a sidewalk plan than we spend on actually repairing sidewalks in a year. But the plan is for the plan is for the future. The plan is for a long amount of time. And I find great joy just in knowing that we have a plan. And I think our public, is going to be happy to see that we have a plan and we have a way of making progress. And the one thing that I'm worried about is that we'll have more defects while we're working on what we have, but can't worry about that too much. Thank you so much. I think the question, one question I have is when you said obstructions, would that include ice plant growing over the sidewalk? Because that's one thing that I notice a lot.
One of the categories is cleanliness, and so if you had cattail bush or whatever growing in the midst of the sidewalk, that would fall under that category, including ice plant growing.
And I also was going to say that if John L. Wood sends in the defects that he knows about, you can match it up with the defects that you've already found, and possibly it'll come out to more than 4.3 thousand. So thank you.
Thank you so very much. And I do not have any questions at this time, but I will check in with everyone here to see if you have questions, minimum 2, or any comments that you'd like to share quickly, so that we can get to the motion of this item. Before I do that, I will say to staff, thank you for preparing this plan. And the plan is not for 1 year. It's something that will be referred to over time. And it'll help us prioritize where the greatest need is in terms of sidewalks, and to really take a look at the funding that's available so that we can meet the needs to connect pathways throughout the city as funding is available. One thing that is true and is factual that anything, any repairs or replacements or even building or construction, it all comes back to the money. And when the money's there, we can refer to this plan, which will be valid for several years, to build the infrastructure and to repair. So I will check in with our folks here, see if you have any final questions too, and or comments before we move to a motion. I'll start with Councilman Mendoza.
I don't have any more questions. I'd like to move that we adopt a resolution accepting the sidewalk master plan.
Thank you so very much. We do have a motion on the floor. I'll move forward to Councilmember Rivera.
I have no comments and I'd like to second that motion.
We have a motion and a second, and I'll check in with Councilmember Snow.
I'd just like to note that I'm really excited that we have a plan in place. I am daunted by the amount of funding that it's gonna take to get what we need in this community. I am very passionate about having sidewalks in the community. I think it improves quality of life and it makes for a safer community for us, our kids, our seniors. And I really wanted to put a lot of focus on trying to realize this. But we're gonna have to be creative about how we're gonna get that funding in here. So I really appreciate it. I love the passion that you took here. Welcome to our city. 60 miles is a lot, and I am glad you walked it all. We're pretty proud of this town. Thank you.
I thank you so very much, and Mayor Pro Tem Gastel.
I don't have any questions. I'm ready to support the proposal.
We do have a motion and a second. I'll ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Mendoza,
Aye.
Councilmember LeBaron,
Councilmember LeBaron, aye.
Councilmember Snow,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Gastel,
Aye.
Mayor Vasquez.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously.
And I do know that our city manager, Lydia Ramirez, would like to share a few words.
I would like to thank the city council for approving the sidewalk master plan. This not only helps our current work that we're doing, but it will set us up for grants. I think that point was missed early on in the slides, is when you're applying for grants, they want to see that you've done forward work, the work on looking at the gaps and identifying the gaps. Those are the cities that are most successful in getting the grants. This is going to set us up for the future in the next 5-7 years to pull down a lot of gaps, to pull down a lot of grant money to close some of these gaps. We just need the staff to apply for the grants and then do the contract management, but that's a discussion for another time, but thank you.
Thank you. Item number 5 is the acceptance of the pavement management plan. And I will turn this over to Public Works Director Izzy Margia to present the staff report.
And there, we're doing a little consultant change right now to bring in our next consultant who did approve who did work on the pavement management plan. And just as a quick preview, we're putting these plans together, as Mr. Murguia said, in preparation for the CIP, because the staff does use the data that we gather to then build the CIP plan that we present to the city council. Mr. Murguia?
Thank you, Madam City Manager, and thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Again, we're pleased to present to you this evening the acceptance of the Pavement Management Program report. The city owns and maintains approximately 70 centerline miles of city streets. To most effectively maintain its streets, the city utilizes a pavement management program, also known as a PMP, to assist staff with pavement management decisions. Utilizing pavement condition and budget information, the PMP provides recommendations on how to cost-effectively allocate available resources to maintain the city's streets. Staff utilizes the schedule and treatment types called for in the PMP to develop its annual street rehabilitation capital improvement projects. The objective of the PMP is to apply, as I mentioned, a cost-effective treatment to the right streets at the right time to maintain pavement conditions throughout the city. The city last updated its PMP in 2018, and on October 4th of last year, the council awarded an agreement to Nichols Consulting Engineers, or also known as NCE, to update the city's PMP for the next 5 years, which covers fiscal years 23-24 through fiscal year 2027 through 2027-2028. Here with me this evening is Vivek John. With NCE, he'll provide background on the PMP, how it's used, questions it helps answer, the overview and objectives of the project, provide an overview of the city's pavement condition, and we'll look at 3 scenarios, 3 different funding level scenarios that we looked at to achieve certain pavement conditions. And at the conclusion of the presentation, we'll conclude with staff's recommendation and next steps. So now I'll turn it over to Vivek.
Thank you, Izzy. Thank you, Council. Right, so as Izzy mentioned, what we are looking at here is a pavement management program, or PMP for short. And this is the first step in developing the CIP list, which is the capital improvement program. What streets should be looked at from their condition perspective. What PMP technically provides the city council or the decision maker is how do you make the most cost-effective decision? Not just the feel of the road, but on a universal level, at a city level, what streets are the worst and how they should be addressed. What we try to answer through this report, what streets are within the city's jurisdiction, what condition they are in, what do they need, and how much funding does the city need to address their network. Typically, it's you use a software to update a PMP, and it's either Street Saver or micropayment. In California, Street Saver is the most common, and that's what the city uses. And we can't see it, but this is like a dashboard view of the city's PMP program. The Street Saver is good in terms of it's a live program. So as the city does work in the future, city staff can go in, update every time, and we can see live what is the PCI. So before I get in, I just wanted to say that we worked with Izzy and Ed through the whole process, and I just wanted to thank them for being so diligent through the whole process in terms of not just getting a report, but getting a report that will be used by the city going forward. And that was very important because we worked with multiple agencies, and to see the passion coming out from Izzy and Ed, that was really good from me, who has basically studied roadway cracks for the last 20 years of my life. So as part of our scope of work, what we did was we did an inventory of what streets are within the city's jurisdiction. We performed a walking survey of the entire city network. We updated all the work that was done since the last update in 2018. Then updated, came up with a decision tree. Decision tree we'll talk later, but that goes in how you determine what streets needs what. Came up with budgets, unit cost for each alternative, and then performed different multiple budget analysis, prepared a budget, submitted a report that was submitted to Izzy and Ed, and then eventually we'll provide some training to the city staff, like I said, to update the Street Saver on an ongoing basis. So you probably heard from me PCI, which is called Pavement Condition Index. This was developed by, I'll give a quick overview so that it makes sense. It was developed by the US Army Corps of Engineers, and the primary reason was, the US Army maintained a lot of military bases within US, but all over the world. And they wanted to come up with a single way of identifying what bases and what areas of those military bases needed to be updated. And that came into the PCI, Pavement Condition Index. It goes from 0 to 100. The higher the number, the better the street is. The figure is not clear, but it goes from like 0 to 25, which is very poor, 25 to 50, which is poor, and from that is like fair and higher. one thing to remember, like anything else, is just looking at the surface. We are not taking any structural assessment of the pavement. It's a technician who's certified, walks the city streets and says, I see X amount of cracks on this road, and that's taken in, calculated what is the impact of the PCI. So we have some pictures here in terms of showing, but I think the image is not good enough. So we are going from PCI of 96, 88, 65, 44, 30, and I think 20. And once you look at the presentation, I think on the screen, you'll see the 96 is almost no distresses other than just a little bit of aging, while your 20 is almost a road which is falling apart. The city current average PCI is 58, which places it in the fair category, and the fair ranges from 50 to 70. Again, this is a whole network. The city, you can see, is the distribution of the PCI, the green being the good, the red being the bad, and the blue being right in the fair condition. This was a breakdown of different roadway classifications, your arterial, collector, residentials. And we also put in next to it what was the PCI at the last survey in the 2017-2018 phase, which was a PCI of overall of 60. So the city has dropped 2 points in the last 5 years, but it's not dropped everywhere. Like you can see, the arterials has gone up by 3 PCI points, but as majority of the city street network is comprised of the residential street, which has dropped from 62 to 56. So on the weighted average, that's why the PCI has come down. This is just more breakdowns of different, roadway classification and what are the split of each of those networks. On a network wide, we see about 50% of the city street network is in good condition. I look at it, about 12% is in fair. The worrying part is you want the least amount of street in the red category, because that's where it starts getting really expensive to address it. Compared to the neighboring agencies, you can look at, from Poway, which is at 79, and Lemon Grove is 58. We also have San Diego County, which is 64. I think some of these agencies, we work with them. We work for the city of county of San Diego to update their PMP. Actually, if you go back, this is just a quick. The statewide average, which is at 65. So this is done biannually. Once in 2 years, NCE, our firm, conducts a statewide survey of all local agencies to figure out where, as a state, what's our statewide average. And right now, the statewide average came out 65. Okay, so going back, this is a graph just showing the cost of addressing the roadways. On the left axis, we have the PCI, the pavement condition index, and then the y-axis, x-axis is the percent of pavement life. And as you can see, even it's like general, if you take good care of something, it takes less to maintain it over the time. And that's why there is a dollar sign right in the top green. And as it follows, gets into the red zone, you have like $5 signs. And this is how any roadway or any asset you maintain, the more you maintain it up front, the less costly it will be in the long run. This was developed for the city. Unit prices based on the past bid prices that the city has received in the bid tabs. And what we also do is we actually compare with neighboring agencies, what are they getting in their bid tabs. And this cost are final costs, right? So these are not just material costs, but we are looking at material, mobilization, engineering costs, construction management. So when we give out the cost, it does have contingency built in, but it is the final cost that we think the city might need to invest over the next year to build that road. So now let's get into the meat of things. So the first analysis PMP does is, in terms of what happens if the city does not spend any money. So for the next 5 years, if the city decides we are not going to spend $1, what will happen? And as we can see, we'll drop from, that's the last row, drops from a 58 to 47. So there was going to be an 11-point drop. Based on my past experience working at it, as the lower the PCI goes, it's going to start dropping very, very fast. So that's one of the things is, one of the charts that we showed at the start as it keeps on flat for a while and then it starts dropping at a very fast rate. A typical pavement in good condition would drop like a point, 2 points a year. And as it gets into your 40s, it's going to drop 5 points a year, right? Basically, it might come out to even 0. That doesn't mean like the roadway has like, you won't be able to drive at all, but it's structurally failed. That's what it's telling you. On the first row is showing that if the city has unlimited budget, how much would the city need to spend to address everything it needs? And right now we are looking at a budget of $41.23 billion. That would address everything the city needs at this very moment. That is one of those where, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do if you had no money? And that becomes our extreme ends in which you start doing the analysis. Those are your boundary conditions. So for our budget scenarios, we ran 3 budget scenarios. One was the realistic city's budget, so which was around 1.16 to 1.26 million over the next 5 years. Every year we predicted what would be the PCI, what road should be done, and how much would be that deferred maintenance. The second scenario was a very interesting scenario where we looked at was taking 1.16 million that the city is expecting to spend. What if we add another 1.16 to address the worst streets within the city? And from that point on, we wanted to increase the PCI by 1 point. So every year we go up by a PCI point over the 5-year cycle. And the last scenario was what would it take in the next 5 years to go from a 58 to a 70? I'm going to quickly go through these scenarios and just kind of give an overall picture. So, we are looking at our PCI going from a 58 to 54 at the city's existing budget. And the scenario 2 and scenario 3 are looking at, kind of going up to like a 62, 64 and a 70. The bar charts are what you call as deferred maintenance. A deferred maintenance is you get to 23, 24 and the budget needed about like X, $40 million, and you're only spending $2 million. So you're leaving 38 million worth of work undone, and that's what deferred maintenance is. That I did not have the money this year, so I'm deferring my work to future years. And those things usually escalate pretty fast because you might go from a slurry seal that is required this year to maybe needing a reconstructed 10 years time. So if you're not addressing it now, that's what it means in the future. And that goes back to the original graph. We said that catching it early, addressing it early is the main way to address it. This again is just comparison, like what happens if you don't do anything, so you drop to a 47. With the budget, you go to a 54, and the best case scenario, you go up to a 70 over the next 5 years. Some more breakdown in terms of, again, the best is looking at green. So we are about 50% in the green, and which kind of stays true for different scenarios. But what I would like to bring the attention is to the red. As you can see, the red keeps on increasing. And when we are planning, from a planning perspective, we want to bring that red down as much as possible to make sure that we are not spending a lot of money just because, the treatment was deferred way too long before, we could get on it. Again, this was running the city's budget, and this is over 5 years. What are the streets that the street saver software, kind of selected. And again, the red is a win and overlay, the yellows are your slurry seals. I think those are the primary colors. What I would like to say this is, during this analysis, one thing that Easy and Ed told us is when you are running a software, it is looking at maximizing the dollar value. So it does not think in terms of constructability. Like, you can take a street which might have multiple sections, and it could just say do one section on northbound side on the north end, and do one section on the far end of the city, just because it had very limited dollars. But when you go actually into construction, you're not going to build just like 100 feet of the road on one end, 100 feet of the road on the other. That is just not constructible. So one of the directions we got from Izzy and Ed was, we know that the scope of work was limited to just looking at the software, but give us something that is actually practical, that we can take, and refine it further, right? Because PFD is first part of your CIP development program. So that was one thing that we actually did it with Easy and Net, kind of going back and forth saying, hey, we can't fit these projects within the budget. So sometimes you might address a street which might not require of extremely intensive treatment. But what it helps is when you're looking at it from a maintenance point of view, your whole street segment gets the same maintenance. So you're not doing a crack repair in one and doing extreme patching, deep patching just 50 feet down, right? So when a contractor looks at your plan, you would actually get better prices because he's thinking, I can mobilize it better in this part of the city, address the work, and I'm gonna just do crack seal in this portion of the city. So conclusion is, the $127 million is basically repairing everything, like ripping it out and putting it new. The city's condition is fair, and the city does not, within the city's budget is 150. So few of the policy recommendation consideration that we had and that we talked to Easy and Net was PCI or the Street Saver software is just looking at structurally what needs to be done. So you can have two roads which are really bad, but they might require extremely different treatments. My master's thesis was studying, how cracks happen, why do they happen, and you can actually figure out, looking at cracks, doing very limited pavement evaluation, that hey, you do not need to rip out this pavement. You can maybe just need to go grind it overlay 2 inches rather than Street Saver saying just rip it all out because it looks 30, and it can be just that the road hasn't been looked at for 40 years. So those things, using engineering judgment with limited testing so that the city does not incur a lot of cost in this evaluation, that might be one way to address a lot more streets within the budget the city has. If you have any utility projects where they're gonna open up the street, it might be a good time to pave a lot of those streets at the same time. And determining how we can increase the paving budget. So we are working multiple agencies which are determining, impact fees. So, when 15 years ago, we would have one waste vehicle coming to the city once a week. Now there are 2 or 3, right? Like you have the waste, the green waste, the compost, the normal thing, right? And that's actually having a huge impact on the city street. So that's one way where we can, the city can say, hey guys, you guys are coming too often, and this is having an impact on the street, and that's quantifiable. These distresses are quantifiable, so that's an avenue to explore. When a street is made, we have a moratorium for a few years, right? But what happens right after the moratorium? If a utility company comes in and opens up your street, we have done enough studies for multiple agencies across California which says that if your street is close to an 80, after a big utility cut, it can drop to a 60, right? Just the way, because, it's like, like if you cut a trench in a road, the water is gonna get through the edges, it's gonna go and it's gonna destroy the road much faster than, and we have done it for multiple agencies, and those are like avenues that the city can explore to increase their paving budget. Okay, that's pretty much it. And leverage local funding, others too, IJA funding is there, the SB1 funding is there. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Vivek. And before we conclude, just some general staff comments. So given the budget constraints in the staff report, staff recommends, utilizing a hybrid approach between scenarios 1 and 2. Given the city's budget constraints and not potentially being able to afford scenario 2, staff recommends increasing street maintenance by the cost of CPI, so 3 to 5% annually to keep up with construction costs. Additionally, as we bring this item for consideration during the budget process, staff is recommending that whenever the council has time to allocate one-time funds to utilize those towards street maintenance for those streets that are less than 25 PCI, as those are the streets that cost more to repair. And then lastly, during the budget process, staff will be bringing forward requests for additional personnel in order to implement a more robust maintenance program to do things such as crack sealing or zone maintenance for street zone maintenance throughout the city. That considers skin patching, minor overlays, things of that nature. And then with that, with council's approval tonight, we'll be utilizing the PMP to develop the next year's CIP plan. We'll be, as Vivek mentioned, utilizing the information, the schedule in the PMP, but using engineering analysis to further narrow the streets for those projects. And then we have Ed Walton here this evening. I just want to give him a chance if he has any additional comments. With that, we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. I'll check with our city clerk to see if we have any speaker slips.
We do not have any speakers.
As we do not have any speaker slips for this item, I will check in with city leaders to see if they have any questions. 2 questions next. I'll start with Councilmember Mendoza.
I don't really have any questions. I've sat through this a couple of times, and I find it all extremely interesting and fascinating, how we rate our streets. Just a couple of comments. I'm really sad to see that we've had a 2% drop over the last 5 years, and that we're so low that we, compared to other cities in our area, La Mesa, Santee, the county. So I do support us having a discussion in the future about how we can let's get back up to 60 at least, even the 60s. We really, I've said this before, but we just need to do a much better job of coordinating with other utilities. When they come out and put in sewer lines and AT&T and Cox, and then, I see that in my own neighborhood. You see them dig up the road, and like the road in front of my house was Safe Routes to School, was part of the Safe Routes to School project, and we had a brand new road, and then like a year later, they come out, I think it was SDG&E comes out and does the work, and now, what is it, only like maybe 5 or 6 years down the road, where is the road falling apart? Right where they dug it up to put those utilities in. So that's just really something we gotta keep track of. Also, a lot of our streets, and I don't wanna malign EDCO, but those trash trucks tear up our streets. And EDCO is in Lemon Grove, which means when they go to pick up trash in Spring Valley, they drive through Lemon Grove streets. So, I don't know what we can do about that, but, smaller trash trucks maybe, I don't know, but, the large, it's not just EDCO, I don't wanna put all the blame on EDCO, but, at some point, council, I think, needs to consider some kind of a plan where, we keep a lot of, and you've seen it in cities where there's signs that say, no trucks over a certain weight on, residential streets. So, those are all I think those are all the comments I have, so thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Rivera.
No comment other than to just thank staff for the work that they did and put into this. Thank you, it was a very good presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Snow.
So after reviewing seeing a decrease, and then I've been driving the road since the rains have come, the roads have gotten significantly worse. Places that weren't that bad, even 6 months ago are now bad. And so, as we get into like budget planning and deciding where we want to put our dollars, it hasn't been that long since I was knocking doors and every single person was like, look out there, fix my street, like, and so I think that this is one of our top priorities, and as close as we can get to scenario 2, where we're, you know, at least trying to push up 1 point, would be really something I think that we should be striving for, as a community, and spending our money there, because it is a really rough place to drive and to get around. You know, watching and seeing, I love the graphs, thank you for that. I'm a visual person, and so that really helps me see, like, if we don't invest in our streets, not only are we gonna be 50, we're gonna be 54 in about 5 years from now. And it's only gonna get worse. And so I think we have to make a significant investment and really push. I know that everything comes at a cost, and other programs and things that we want to accomplish, but streets is a huge priority for the constituents.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gasko.
Yeah, the fact that we've gone down in our PCI in the past 5 years is particularly cause for concern when you look at how much we've spent in the past 5 years. The gas tax was an incredible benefit to Lemon Grove, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've been spending more in the past 5 years on streets than we did in the 5 years before that. Yeah, and so the fact that we've been spending more on streets, and we're not even quite treading water. We're doing a little, pretty close to treading water. Not getting anywhere. But on the plus side, I think that the spending that we've done on major streets is significant, and I think the fact that we got through a year with no fatalities is something to be very proud of, and might reflect on might in some way reflect on the improvements we were able to make in major streets, the streets that people drive them on the most, and the streets that tend to have the fastest speeds. So I'm not too discouraged that we went down slightly, when I keep in mind that we probably have made a lot of progress on some of the most important streets. I'm a big supporter of one-time money being spent on streets, because we'll save money in the long run. The money that we're able to spend on streets later will go farther if we make a huge investment now. So thank you so much for your report. I've seen many of these reports, and they only get better. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And one of the things that's really vital to any city is being able to ensure goods and services can move throughout the city. Without that, it really compromises everyone's quality of life, but it also compromises businesses in their abilities to sell those goods and to sell those services. I can sit here and say, based on the data, that just 5 years ago, the investment in city streets was only $350,000. And I'll repeat that. It was only $350,000. And for 2022, which is the budget cycle that we're in right now, we actually invested $1.3 million. And of that, we allocated a portion of that to address some of the worst streets in Lemon Grove. Is that enough? Absolutely not. Given, and I notated, and I want to make sure I got this right. In order to fix all of the streets in the city of Lemon Grove, that's $41.23 million, and that's $41.23 million that we don't have. But we can work together, have really thoughtful discussions about how we're going to prioritize our budget to really try and not only maintain our streets, because that's a big part of it. You got two tracks going. You got maintaining and you got improvements. And so, it's a matter of, creating a balance between those two priorities. And, if we can prioritize our dollars, to continue to focus on those two things simultaneously, then we will definitely see the points jump up, jump high, and that is my hope. So, I know moving forward as a leader, I want to continue to have the conversations of how, well, number one, the conditions of our streets, but how we can allocate our funding to address the condition of our streets. And that should be one of our biggest priorities, and that's fixing our streets. So I wanted to put that out there. Thank you so much for taking time to explain to us how you come up with the numbers in terms of the conditions, but also putting a dollar sign next to what an improvement means, because we can talk about it and say that the streets are bad, you know, and we can talk about, oh, we need to fix the streets. But at the end of the day, it takes money, and real money, to make those improvements. So, just wanted to share that with everyone. A hearty thank you to you, and all the staff involved in putting this together for us. And we'll check in again to see if there's any additional questions or comments. 2 questions per person. I'll start with Councilmember Mendoza.
I was just pointing out to, Mayor Pro Tem Gastel that his street is a less than 10. Yeah, pretty bad. So I will move that we, accept the pavement management program report.
I'll second
We have a motion and a second, and, I will, move forward, to questions and comments, with Councilmember LeBaron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no questions at this time.
Thank you, and, Councilmember Snow?
No further comments?
Thank you, and I will check in with, excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem Gasol to see if you have any comments, although I know you already, were part of the motion.
Yeah, I'm not at all surprised to see that my street is less than 10. Yeah, sometimes I feel like maybe that's what it's like to walk on the surface of the moon. So I have no further comment.
Thank you, we have a motion and a second, I'll check in with our city clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Mendoza,
Aye.
Councilmember LeBaron,
Councilmember LeBaron, aye.
Councilmember Snow,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Gastel,
Aye.
Mayor Vasquez.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, and we will now, go to item 1B, which is payment and demands. So it's the payment and demands, and so I'll call on Councilmember LeBaron to provide her questions. And after that, I will look to our city leaders to see if we have a motion. I'll turn it over to Councilmember LeBaron, you have the floor.
Thank you. My laptop died a little bit, little minutes ago, so I have to look on my phone at the agenda, item 1B. And my questions were regarding some legal. Thank you, Councilmember Mendoza. My question is concerning some payments made to attorneys. It's here. Okay, and this question is directed to, our city attorney. Ms. Stuckey, could you please tell me what the city paid the law offices of Angel O? $8,952 for?
That's for a personnel investigation.
And to who?
It's an internal personal investigation.
And to who?
We can't say it publicly yet.
Okay, so that was to the law offices of Angel Ho.
I'll add to that.
that's internal, with staff,
When did that begin?
maybe 3 months ago. 3-4 months ago. The internal investigations are within the authority of the city manager, so long as they are, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, so long as they're within the budget that she's allotted.
Understood, thank you for clarifying that the $8,952 paid to the law offices of Angel Ho is for an internal personnel investigation that's been ongoing and began about 3 months ago. Thank you. That's that. That was another one. Pardon, folks. Okay. No, there was something else here, sorry. Okay. I don't think this was the one, I think there was another attorney fee, but okay, let's see, for not wanting to hold this up more. There's a charge of, I think, about 1,000? Yeah. It's of about 1,000, it's $1,683, and it's to Libert Cassidy Whitmore. It says for professional services. What is that for?
Councilmember LeBaron, I have to get back to you. I don't know exactly what this is for from Lieber, Cassidy, and Whitmore. We use their firm as part of the consortium for HR, so it could be part of our consortium fee costs. And what the consortium offers us is sort of free legal advice, but also HR stuff, and it's part of a consortium that all of the HR managers in San Diego County are part of. But I can get back to the full council on that, because I'm not exactly sure. It looks like about the right amount for our quarterly or our half-year payment, but I'd have to go back and check.
Okay, so you're telling me the city uses the law firm of Lippert, Cassidy, and Whitmore for HR purposes?
That is correct. And it's Liebert.
Lippert, okay. And that's a flat fee, or is that connected to the internal personnel investigation?
No, that's something very different.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you so very much, and, I see that, none of the other elected officials have questions regarding item 1B, and so do we have a motion?
I'll move approval of the payment demands.
Thank you, and a second?
Second?
I'll ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Councilmember Mendoza? Aye. Councilmember LeBaron?
Councilmember LeBaron, aye.
Councilmember Snow? Aye. Mayor Pro Tem Castillo?
Aye.
Mayor Vasquez?
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you so very much. Before we go to our closed section, I will mention that our next regularly city council meeting will be held on April 18th, 2023 at 6 p.m. And I'll turn this over to our city attorney to adjourn us into closed session.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We are adjourned to closed session for a conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9 D1, and that is the project for open government versus the city of Lemon Grove.
Thank you, I'm going to be recusing myself from tonight's closed session.
Thank you.